Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today in this module, we will be discussing about waste collection with special emphasis on collection routing and collection crew. Waste is nothing but any unwanted or unused material that is discarded into the environment. Underdeveloped countries and developing countries, they discard the waste into the open environment without any protection. As a result, it causes a lot of environmental and health hazards to the humans as well as animals. To have a proper management or to avoid the consequences of the waste on the environment and health, you need a proper waste management plan. Now, waste management plan involves a lot of steps, starting from waste generation, waste collection, its transfer and transport, waste processing, waste treatment, and finally disposal in a controlled environment, nothing but a landfill. Now, in this module, we will be discussing about waste collection. Now, waste collection is the second step or the major step in waste management plan. It involves almost 60 to 70% of the total cost which is involved in waste management. It is very crucial and you have to do it in a proper way. Now, waste collection, it is done in many different steps, like it involves the selection of a proper storage container, proper crew, and how it is routed, how they are collected, they are brought and then segregated. Now, in this module, we will be discussing specially about waste collection routing and collection crew. In our previous modules, we discussed about the collection frequency, collection vehicles, storage containers, and how they can be located at various places. I mean, where are the, at what distance they should be placed. All these things we discussed in previous module. With this introduction, now let's look into the learning objectives of this module. The learning objectives of this module include, first, to understand the routing mechanism that is involved in waste collection. Then we will study about the waste collection crew, its organization and the operation mechanism. Then we will calculate the waste collection time and the number of vehicles used in waste collection. Now, let's begin with collection frequency. Collection frequency is nothing but the rate at which the waste is collected from a collection area. The collection frequency depends on a number of factors like the population, community, requirement of a locality, then lifestyle, income groups and climatic conditions. Now, population, as you know, it is very clear. Higher the population, more will be the waste generation, and the frequency of collection should also be very high. Now, community also demands what is the nature of community. For example, it is a rural community or it is an urban community. Accordingly, also the waste collection frequency varies. Now, the requirement of a locality is another important factor that determines the collection frequency. For example, residential area requires frequent collection. Unlike your other places like the commercial area or institution or industries where the waste collection will be less. So, always residential area will require frequent waste collection, and moreover in residential area you will have a lot of biodegradable waste generation. Hence, you have to involve more people and it should the waste should be collected every day. Likewise, if you talk about an urban area, which I have already mentioned earlier, the urban area, the amount of waste generation will be high. Like there can be a lot of packaging materials and other e-waste, and a lot of waste will be generated according to the lifestyle or income group. So, that is why like urban area it generates more waste, and there you need a frequent collection than your rural areas. Then comes your income group and lifestyle. Now, when you talk about the income group, the average waste collection frequency or the rate of waste collection is directly proportional to the income levels. Certain reports say that the low income countries showed low collection rates, that is around 41%, while the high income countries showed 98% of waste collection. High income groups tend to waste a lot of waste materials like food, clothes, furnitures and other used materials. It can be other computer items or e-waste too. Also, income favors them to buy, replace and dispose of old ones. Hence, you have to go for frequent waste collection. Also, these areas, they generate a lot of packaging material, which even I have mentioned earlier, and hence the frequency of collection is more. Then let us discuss about the climatic conditions, how climatic conditions influences your waste collection. Now, in a hot humid climate, the waste collection must be frequent because the rate of microbial activity will be very high and the decomposition rates will be faster. So, because of that, what will happen? Bad odor or foul smell keeps generating and you can find a watery liquid oozing out of the waste. Hence, you have to dispose of the waste every day and the collection frequency or the collection should be done every day. Now, the climate also necessitates at least twice or thrice collection of waste. Now, this is applicable for putrescible material too. Now, what is a putrescible material? Which can degrade or which rots very frequently. So, if you have a putrescible material, with this also involve frequent collection. Now, let us look into the collection frequency and health. How is health influenced by the collection frequency, or how collection frequency directly affects the health? Now, as you all know, the health of a worker or a residential or a person staying in a residential area, it is directly or indirectly connected to collection frequency. When you have a lot of waste that is accumulated in heaps and it is not collected, then what will happen? It will attract a lot of insects and vectors which will carry a lot of diseases to the human beings who are staying in the locality. So, the potential exposure of householders and waste collectors to health risk is higher when the waste is collected at extended frequency. I mean, after a long period of time, if you start collecting your waste once in a week, then more problem will be there related to health. Now, certain reports also say that waste stored for a longer period of time in open bins favors the growth of mites, maggots and bacteria. The decomposition of waste by these organisms also releases a lot of endotoxins which when inhaled might cause lung inflammation. The collection frequency is also determined by the storage containers. Now, the requirement of containers will determine the collection frequency. According to the population and quantity of waste generation, the number of containers should increase. Now, again, open containers will necessitate more frequent collection than your sealed containers, because open containers, what will happen is lot of flies and mosquitoes and everything will start breeding, and lot of animals also will dodge into and create a mess. So, open containers, if it is there, then you have to have a frequent waste collection compared to a sealed containers. The other factors that determine or affect the collection frequency is if you inappropriately estimate the waste generation, and if the waste generation is irregular, then it will automatically increase the overall cost of waste collection. So, you have to do a proper planning and also segregate the waste at source. If you do so, the waste collection cost will minimize and it will be reduced to a greater extent. Now, this table shows the advantages and disadvantages of the collection frequency. If you see the potential advantages, if you do once per week collection or less than that, the cost is less and it requires less fuel. And if you talk about the disadvantages, it is improperly stored waste can create odor and vector problems. Favorable conditions can be where you can go for once per week collection is in cold and moderate climate you can go for once per week or less than that. Now, when you do twice per week collection, the advantages will be it will reduce litter, it will reduce storage requirement, but the disadvantages, it is more expensive and it will require more fuel. This is favorable for warm climates. Now, when you talk about more than twice per week collection frequency, again this will reduce litter, it will reduce the storage requirement. On the other hand, disadvantage will be it will be more expensive and it will require more fuel. Now, this is favorable for places where you have dense population. I mean the population density wherever it is high, that demands more collection frequency or more frequent collection frequency. Now, let us discuss about the collection route or collection routing. The route planned by a collection crew to collect waste in a specific area is called as collection routing. Now, if you have a proper planning of the collection routes, this will again decrease the overall cost of labor. It will decrease the overall cost of waste collection. I mean, it will not involve additional labor cost, and it will also conserve energy by minimizing the vehicle fuel consumption, and it will also reduce the working hours. The size of each route will be decided based on the amount of waste collected per stop, distance between stops, and the loading time. Now, traffic conditions also influence your route. Now, barriers such as railroads, embankments, rivers and roads with heavy traffic congestion can be considered to divide the routes into small areas. Now, proper planning will again improve the efficiency of collection, and it will decrease the cost. Now, it will also help the supervisor to track the collection crew, and the success of waste collection will always depend upon the collection crew and the equipment requirement. Now, once the collection crew is formed, it is essential for a solid waste manager to lay down the collection route. If the routing is not done in a proper way, or improper routing will always result in ineffective waste collection. Now, the collection route is said. Now, how is the collection routing laid? The collection routing is laid or decided after several trials of motion time experiments. The collection routing is a heuristic process, and it does not involve any standard or universal set of rules. The routes are prepared by relatively a simple approach that will define a specific pattern of routing. A route map should always illustrate the collection points, the garbage service locations, one-way, two-way streets, location of processing and disposal sites, and the natural barriers and traffic congested areas. All these things should be mapped in a route before you lay out a proper routing plan. Now, what are the guidelines for laying out the collection route? First, you should know the details of the amount of waste that is being generated. You should know the collection points, the collection frequency, the crew size and vehicle type. You should identify them and then coordinate them. The routes should be laid out in such a way that they begin and end near arterial streets. Also, the physical barriers such as the railway tracks, bridges, river, embankments should be taken as route boundaries. What I mean to say is that these can be taken as the limitations or boundaries within which you can designate it as one area. The routes should neither be fragmented nor overlapping. See, if it is fragmented or if it is overlapping, that will again lead to movement of vehicles again and again, which will increase the fuel consumption as well as the overall cost of collection. Now, again these routes should be compact and show clustered street segments of a particular area. Now, when you talk about a hilly terrain, the routing should begin at the top and should come downhill, because when you carry all the load and then you take it uphill, again the fuel consumption will be high. So, always it is better that in a hilly terrain that you start from the uphill and then come or proceed towards the downhill. The pattern of routing should be such that the last point of waste generation should always be located near the disposal site. By doing so, you again will avoid unnecessary fuel consumption and the overall collection cost. Now, areas suffering from heavy traffic congestion should be visited during the early hours of the day, so that the unnecessary rush and traffic congestion can be avoided. Likewise, areas that generate a large quantity of waste should be visited during the first part of the day. One-way streets should begin at the upper end of the street and always should end in the down street through the looping process. Dead-end streets can be serviced at T-junctions, that is intersecting segments. Now, the collections involving both sides of the streets should require long straight path before anti-clockwise turning. One-sided collections can be routed with many anti-clockwise turns around the blocks. Scattered pickup points with small quantity of waste generation should be attended in one trip on the same day. Now, let us discuss about the various steps that is involved in establishing a collection route. They include 1. preparation of maps showing the points of waste generation. Second, preparation of information summary table. Then preliminary route, that is preliminary route layout. Then development of balance routes after trials. Now, once the routes are laid down on the paper, they are given to the collection crew for implementation. Now, with field experience, the route is modified and it can be entered into the database as a new route. For example, always whatever you put it in the map, that will not be same when you go to the field. So, as and when you go, if you have any problems with the routing that has been done over map, you can always add on the field experience and you can modify the route at any time. A schedule is prepared for each route with details of location and sequence of pickup points, and this will be provided to the collection crew. Now, every truck driver should maintain a route book which he uses to check the location and record the problems that are associated with them. The information that will be recorded can be used to modify the collection route again at any point of time. Now, generally motion time experiment or motion time measurement is the standard method or procedure which is used to develop a solid waste collection system. Now, what is this? It is a technique by which the time taken for the movement of the collection crew is estimated with the help of a stopwatch. The result, such as the time, distance, number of containers, are all tabulated to identify the best series of activities that the collection crew must follow to collect the waste in a shortest possible time. The motion time experiment also helps us in determining the best equipment that can achieve a good output and reduce various health problems. The problems of the workers who are handling the waste. In recent times, the motion time measurement studies involve the usage of video cameras at different locations, so that it will help to study the movement of collection crew. This is mainly done to make the collection crew conscious and complete the work within the stipulated time. This is very essential because when you do not have a proper control over these workers, they might not work properly and the waste collection time will keep delaying. It will also improve the credibility of the crew. Now, many developed countries are also using these geographical information systems, the GPS, to identify the location of the crew. This will once again improve the performance of the collection crew. This will make them conscious and a sort of credibility will be added. Now, this table shows how a motion time experiment is performed. For example, you can list down all the stations, point wise places where you have to collect the waste. On one side, you can note down the time of arrival and departure of the collection crew. You can note down the kilometers and the number of containers in that particular limit or within between each stop. Then you can also note down the collection time. Then what is the trip time to the next station? All these things if you know, then it will help us to identify the exact time that is required for collection of waste between two stops. Also, you should know what is the total weight of the waste or total load in tons. You should know how much waste is being generated in each locality or each station. Now, let us discuss about the type of collection routing. Now, majorly if you see, there are three types of collection routing. One is your macro routing, micro routing and districting. In a macro routing, it is a process by which the total area will be divided into routes in a way that it represents the collection of a single day. The amount of waste collected per point distance between point loading and unloading time and traffic condition will determine the size of the route. Now, barriers like rivers, roads, railway tracks and traffic signals can be used to divide the routes into territories. Since macro routing balances the size and shape of the route area within the limits of the barrier, they are also called as route balancing method. Now, the second type of routing is micro routing. The specific path to be covered by each crew and the collection vehicle per day will be defined by the micro routing. So, as such if you see, macro routing will be broad, and for a particular territory or for a particular area, it will divide into small areas with proper barriers and other boundaries. Now, within that, each collection crew, what are the streets, how many streets a particular collection crew should go or carry out, that will be defined by your micro routing. Now, micro routing is laid based on the results of macro routing. The third type of routing is your districting. Now, when the area is large enough and it is not possible for one collection institution to handle the waste generation, then you can divide the area into many different zones and you can give the contract or tender to different institutions. For example, a metropolitan city like Delhi, it is very huge and one institution or organization cannot handle the waste. In that case, what you have to do is divide the metropolitan city or Delhi into different zones, maybe the north zone, south zone, east zone, west zone, and then each zone can be allocated to a separate institution and they will be responsible for the collection of waste in that particular area. Now, to facilitate efficient waste collection, the area is divided into smaller sections. That is what I told you, and I have already given you an example of a metropolitan city. Now, let us discuss about the collection crew. Now, what is a collection crew? It is nothing but the person who is involved in collecting the waste from house to house, person who is involved in transferring the waste from the small vehicles into trucks or from trucks and taking it into the transfer station or the disposal site. All these are considered as the responsibility of a collection crew, and people who are performing this are put together and called as a collection crew. Now, collection crew can generally consists of 8 to 12 persons and they are headed by a supervisor. The size of the crew will again vary from community to community, region to region, amount of waste generated in a locality and waste collection frequency. And also the method of waste collection which is involved between the houses, the size and type of collection vehicle, route characteristics, all these things will determine the size of your collection crew. Another important factor that will determine the collection crew is the labor and the equipment cost. Now, the crew size increases when there is an increase in the rate of waste generation. Less collection frequency also increases the crew size because the quantity of waste generated per individual stop will be high. Now, the crew size has a great effect on the collection cost because it will lead to improper collection frequency, segregation of material at source and implementation of automation in collection. Now, let us discuss about the cost involved in waste collection. Now, as I mentioned earlier, around 60 to 70% of the total cost is borne by waste collection. Now, cost of collection containers, collection vehicle, labor charge of collection crew add to the overall cost of waste collection. Now, the labor charges depend upon the crew size, service time, travel time and discharge time. Again, the cost of labor will vary from city to city or town to town or a large city to a small town. Example, in a large city with narrow lanes and heavy traffic congestion, the collection vehicles will require minimum of 4 persons per vehicle to manually collect the waste, which will again add to the cost of labor. But on the contrary, if you see a small town with less vehicle congestion and more space, vehicle with 1 person is sufficiently enough to handle the waste. This will reduce the cost. Again, if you talk about the vehicles, the mechanically loaded system involving 1 person per crew is considered to be cost effective. And when you talk about maintenance, the maintenance of storage container, collection vehicle, compactors will also add to the cost of collection. And if you have the waste is commingled or source separated waste, accordingly it will have the different cost. If you talk about the commingled waste, it will add to the cost when compared to a source separated waste. Now, let us discuss about how to analyze the collection time. Now, the collection time is calculated as per the formula y is equal to a plus b plus c into d plus e plus f plus g. Now, y is the total collection time, A is garbage to route time, B is actual time for collecting the waste, C is the number of trips to disposal site, D is time to drive fully loaded truck to disposal facility, to unload them and to return back to the collection area. E is nothing but the time to drive the garbage at the end of the trip. F is the official breaks including the lunch breaks, restroom visits, etc. G is the lost time, such as the time lost during traffic jams or breakdowns or unavoidable congestion is calculated or designated as G. Now, F plus G is nothing but off route time, that is usually a fraction of Y. A, B and E are the function of distance and speed, B is a function of number of customers, time per customer and number of loads, and C is a function of capacity of the vehicle and its compaction ratio. Now, you can also calculate the number of vehicles that is required for collecting waste from a specific area, and it is calculated as per the formula N is equal to SF by XW. N is the number of vehicles that is required, S is the total number of customers that is being served per week, F is the collection frequency, X is the number of customers truck can serve per day, and W is number of work days per week. Now, finally, let us look into the management of collection system. The main objective of managing the collection system will include protection of public health and maintain cost effective services, management of collection system that can be done by both private and public entities. Now, the advantage of a private entity is it rarely faces the monetary problem. They will not have any financial problem and they will be capable enough to bear the expenses related to purchase of containers and collection vehicles. Moreover, in a private entity, the labor charges are well taken care of in addition to the flexibility in maintaining the collection crew. Now, in India, the private entities are generally authorized by the government through franchise of service agreement. The significant role is also played by the public entity or government entity. In countries where both public and private entities work hand in hand, the efficiency of waste collection is high, or it will increase the waste collection efficiency. To summarize, at the end of this module, we have discussed about what is collection frequency and what are the factors that are influencing collection frequency, like your population, community, climatic conditions, income group, etc. How every individual factor influences your collection time. Then we discussed about the different collection routing mechanisms, starting from various guidelines. How will you perform the collection if it is a hilly terrain, or how will you divide it into different routes which will provide maximum efficiency with minimum or reduced cost of collection. Then that is given in the guidelines, and then we also discussed about the various steps that is involved in the collection routing. Then we studied about how to calculate the collection time and the number of vehicles. In collection routing, we discussed about the motion time experiment. We learned about how to do the motion time experiment. Then finally, we discussed about the collection crew, the cost of collection that will be involved in the waste collection, and finally, we discussed about the various management options, like who is involved in the waste collection, whether it is a private entity or public entity. Private entity, what are the advantages what is the advantages or disadvantages of a public entity. We also saw like if the public and the private entity work together, the efficiency of waste collection can improve. I hope this module would be of help to you. Thank you.